In this video, we're going to find out which camera is the right one for you, the Sony ZV-E10 Mark I or the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. And the term vlog implies that this camera is made for YouTubers or egomaniac low-life TikTokers. But in reality, vlog is just code for entry-level cameras. Granted, it is a very powerful entry-level camera. So before we get into the comparison aspects, the ZV-E10, the original Mark I, is around 2 years old. It's not that old. However, the difference between the version 1 and version 2 is going to be quite large. All right, let's go over the advantage of the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. It has a new sensor from the A6700 from the Sony FX30. It is faster. It is made for higher bit rates and higher frame rates. It's overall a great direction to be in. It has a directional capsule mic. So unlike the original one, which picks up from all sorts of directions, the new one can pick up at your discretion. You can point it to the front of the camera, you could point it to the rear, or you can have it pick up from all directions. So it's the best of many worlds. Okay. The camera has a full touch UI. It has the Bion's XR style menus, and that means that operationally it's much faster than the old one. That means you're going to be picking up this camera and learning it much faster than the old one. It has a cinematic vlog, which is just the additional crops, and it has the LUTs and looks that are baked into the camera that you can bake into the camera. You don't have to, because it has 10-bit video, and that higher bit depth means that the quality of your footage is going to be much better. You're going to less chance of splotching. You're going from 1,000,000 hues to 1,000,000,000 hues. There's going to be a good bump in quality. Okay. And it has power delivery. So now you can charge the camera much faster than the old one based on USB-C, because this camera probably doesn't have a charger. So you can just use your phone charger and hook it into the camera, and it'll use power delivery to power up your camera or to keep it ongoing for long periods of record time. Okay, and of course, it has the Z battery, and the Z battery is pretty much Sony's standard these days for basically most of their interchangeable lens cameras, because it works well and it's much needed, and more on that a little bit later. So the original version, it has some advantages of its own. The Sony ZV-E10 Mark I is a lot less expensive. It is $700 compared to the new one, which goes for $8,000. That's quite a big jump, going from 700 to 1,000. Okay. It is slightly lighter and smaller, not by much, but by 30 or so grams, and just a little bit shorter. All the directions, less volume. And here's a big one, and it has a mechanical shutter. So mechanical shutter means that you can take photos. You can use a flash at higher sync speeds. It means that it can be used as a stills camera by serious photographers, while the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II, nobody's gonna be touching that for photos, because you're going to run into banding and you're going to run into skewing. It might work for very niche scenarios, but it does seriously hamper its photo abilities. So the ZV-E10 Mark II is made for entry-level vloggers or camera users, and it's aimed at a certain market. However, it's aimed at general entry-level users. And I think I'm going to be breaking down how this camera is to the consumer of this market. And I think the first and most important thing is that the battery life. The Z battery is going to make the biggest difference of this camera. The original battery is half the capacity. So that means that in practice, you have even less than half of usable time, because nobody waits until they're completely depleted before changing batteries. You wait until you have 1 bar left, maybe. Okay, so 1 bar left, you're already changing batteries, and that means that a larger battery, you're just delaying the change time a lot longer. But it also means that you have the necessary juice for this 10-bit. And from what I'm seeing from Sony cameras over time is that they are using more and more power. They're becoming more power hungry, because this menu system is the latest menu system that has the swipeable menus, it has the orientation menus, and it does seem to draw a lot of juice. The record times is around 1.5 hours, and I remember there used to be a time when the Sonys, even with this 10-bit, can do 2 hours, but 1.5 hours, that's quite a bit of a downgrade. But it's still much longer than the original ZV-E10, which is around 1 hour-ish of record time. That is straight all the way through. So the battery is kind of a big deal, and it's going to be the biggest factor for a lot of people. The next factor is the UI. Okay, so this touch menu, compared to the older touch menu, the UI is going to make transitioning from a smartphone to a camera much more intuitive. You'll be able to make changes just so much faster. The menu is organized better. And on top of that, you're going to do a lot less clicks, moving from menu item to menu item. So it could mean going 3 less clicks to do something, as opposed to 3 additional button presses, and that can mean a lot. And the newer version, the ZV-E10, has those side menus. Those side menus, they might not be the ones you want, but they are helpful. I'm sure there's going to be some that you really like into those side menus, and that's going to make things just so much faster to navigate and to learn. And because the camera doesn't have a front scroll wheel, that means that you can navigate it better just using the touch menu. It's quite a big difference. Next up, the practicality of the new ZV-E10 is going to be the audio. That front rear directional mic may seem like a gimmick at first, and using built-in audio from a camera might seem like a gimmick. But if you're traveling and you have the camera in close proximity with you, you're just holding it, you're not putting it down, it can make a big difference. In general, I feel that the ZV cameras, they have great audio, and this amplifies that to the next level, and it's going to be good if it's anything like the ZV-E1. The ZV-E1, I use it without an audio interface all the time because it just works great. So why not? Why make yourself have a more complicated setup when you don't need to? And then you could just hook up a 3.5 millimeter or a hot shoe mic if you want to. The thing is that the audio just matters so much in video, and this is going to be a huge improvement. So the next thing I want to talk about is image quality. Yes, image quality is a bit down the list for me, because I do think that an APS-C sensor from one generation to the next one is going to be roughly the same. It's not going to be a huge difference. There might be some color science differences, but there's been color science differences for a long time already. It's a small progression, and it is what it is. I think that going from 8-bit to 10-bit, it seems a lot for people behind the camera. People watching and consuming the content, they don't really care. 6-bit, 10-bit, 8-bit, whatever. They're just watching. If you have interesting content, they'll watch it. And that's just the fact of the matter. It's just that when you're processing the videos, and you're processing 8-bit versus 10-bit, then you can feel it. It's kind of like processing a JPEG versus processing a RAW file in photos. And you'll be able to feel, you'll be able to see the differences. People that are consuming it, they won't know any difference. And another thing is that when it comes to your final product of your video, 8-bit, 10-bit, what the consumer of the video may not see is that when you're filming such things in 8 versus 10-bit is that you may not be pushing 8-bit all the way. And so what you post might be good enough, but what you post with the 10-bit file is like you're comfortable with more. But in reality, the viewers, I mean, there's no such thing as a video file geek. Okay, those people, do they really exist other than like photographers and filmmakers? When it comes to consumers, I don't think those people really exist, because if they did, 8K TVs would be a thing, but they're really not. But when we're talking about image quality, how can we forget the elephant in the room? And that is mechanical shutter. This camera, the ZV-E10 Mark II, did away with mechanical shutter, and that's going to be a huge loss for photo users and photo users that want a simple, inexpensive package. So I think that the ZV-E10 Mark I is still going to be around to please that market, but it's really unfortunate that they had to go that route. If they had a faster sensor, maybe it would be more acceptable, but this sensor is just not fast enough to be mechanical shutter free. And the flash sync speed is only at 1/30th. So I'm assuming that the electronic shutter is only slightly faster than that at 14-bit RAW. Okay, because when it records video, it's recording at lower bit rates, recording higher bit rate, then it can't read that fast. Okay, so that's a silly limitation. That's really the thing, that when it comes to the price of this thing, $1,000. Okay, so in my prediction, I thought that they would retain the same price, but that was just a bad prediction, because Sony, they like to keep older models around, so they're going to keep around the ZV-E10 Mark I. And the reason for the price increase doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because say they updated the battery, sure, that's a valid thing to increase price. They updated the video specs from 8 to 10-bit, and they have 4K 60. However, they don't have 4K 120. 4K 60 is pretty darn good, and it's at 10-bit, so there's a lot going for the camera. But is that worth $300? They didn't even add IBIS, going from one generation to another one. So the physical cost isn't going to be high because there was no IBIS. And getting rid of mechanical shutter, that assembly probably costs nearly as much as the IBIS unit. They did away with that and still increased the price. And is it fair? No, but the camera is still good. But if you think about it, the price shouldn't have went up so much, or should have stayed rather close to neutral. Having said that, which one is the right one for you? And I still say that this camera is going to be very appealing just because of the 10-bit video. It's going to be very appealing because it seems that the active stabilization does work well. However, the crop is absolutely insane. That did not approve, and I thought that would be an improvement based upon my prediction. And so between the two, active stabilization is just a non-factor. Yeah, the crop is still humongous. The extra $300 gets you 10-bit and 4K 60. Is that enough? Probably, yeah. So if I was in the market to buy either one, I'd get the ZV-E10 Mark II. Personally, I would get it, but I wouldn't be completely happy because of the price increase, and because the ZV-E10 original, it's just my opinion that this original one should have came with the original touchscreen already. It should have came with the Bionz XR. So it's just one of those things it didn't. It came after when the Bionz XR was already in the market, but Sony still put the old menu in it. So it is what it is. However, the new one is going to be very good. But you got to consider that close to it is also the A6700. It is a few $100s more, and that's on top of already high $1,000. But it does have the mechanical shutter, which you'll probably want. It does have a side corner EVF, and it does have 4K 120. So you're getting a lot more for your price with the A6700, but still it is a lot more expensive too. Yeah, Sony is just really segmenting the market well within their products, and it's just that the active stabilization, that crop is just a bit too much. Yeah, it is a bit too much for my liking. I mean, I'm using an older camera right now, the RX 100 Mark 7. The crop isn't that bad. It's like a 10% for active stabilization or less. It just isn't much, and on top of that, it feels like it's really steady as it is. Anyhow, let me know what you guys think. Is this thing going to be a hot seller? It is going to be a hot seller, but does it impress you? Is it going to be on your list of to-do things, to buy things? Anyhow, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, share. See you in the next one. Take care.